Hey everybody, I picked up a new tank off Facebook Marketplace and I wanted to go over how it went for me and just the process of setting it all up. So, this first picture is when I got it loaded up into the U-Haul. This is when I got my first good look at everything. The tank looked really good with no chips on the edges. Everything looked nice to me. The glass was clean. The stand looked good. I like that the stand had 2x6s on most of the vertical supports, opposed to the old stand that I made for my first 125. So just looking at it, it seemed more sturdy. The coolest thing about the stand is that it's got wheels. It's got 6 caster wheels on the bottom. So my U-Haul had a ramp on it, and it made loading and unloading pretty easy, and I got it into my apartment pretty easy with just me and a friend. So here it is in the apartment set up next to my 125, and that's the new stand that I built for my 125. The biggest complaint from the seller was that when the stand, or excuse me, when the tank had water in it, the stand was extremely flimsy, and he was blaming it on the wheels. And he was saying that when the tank is at least halfway full of water, that the whole stand is just too shaky, and he didn't trust it. And I felt it without water in it, and everything still felt pretty shaky. And then I started looking around at the stand because it seems overbuilt, but then the more I looked, I started noticing a lot of issues. And so, like, you could see between the horizontal 2x6 and the vertical 2x6 on the top left corner there's quite a big gap between the vertical support and the actual horizontal piece. And that's when I started looking and realized that none of the 2x6s were actually touching. None of the vertical 2x6s were actually touching any of the horizontal 2x6s. And the entire top box frame was just being held together with 2 screws on a 2x4 on the inside frame. So underneath of those 2x6 vertical supports, this is what's actually supporting everything. So here's a close-up of the inside. There's 2 screws on each one of these 2x4s, and that's it. So there's 12 screws total that's holding the entire weight of this. So there's over 1,500 pounds of just straight vertical pressure on 12 screws, and that was supposed to hold all this. And it's a little scary to me that the guy that I bought this from actually filled up the tank and had water in it with the way that it's set up right now. So here's the stand. I ended up taking off all the 2x6s and I covered them in liquid nails, all on the inside, top and bottom, down here and up here. And then I put liquid nails up on the upper rim up here. So all of that is adhered, and it's still wet and everything. And then what I ended up going back through and doing, which is extremely dangerous, is you can't see right now because the lighting, but the on the other side of this there's a 2x4, and there's 1 and then 2 screws on the other side going in, and I took all of those out. So there's 12 of those screws, and those 12 screws were holding the entirety of all the weight of this stand, or I'm all the way to the tank, excuse me. So all of the weight from right here was just on those 12 screws and not on the actual posts. So once I filled all liquid nails all inside these gaps and on the inside, when I removed those screws, the tank was able to compress down this top frame onto the actual vertical supports, the real vertical supports, not those 2x4s. So even when I was able to grab the top of the tank and pull down, you can kind of see it here. If I do it, it would start to squeeze out. And so I pushed in as much liquid nails into all the gaps that I could, just to kind of fill in anything. It will help a lot with the rigidity. And then I went and I got one of the bags of black diamond sand that I like to use. I have it over there in this tank. Don't worry about the mess right now. And I put a bag of black diamond in there. You know, it's only about 50 pounds or so, but just that was enough. I wiped this smooth, and putting that 50-pound bag, look how much just squeezed out. So whenever this dries, when I take that bag out, this corner of the stand is at least going to be down and secure and pushed into this as much as it needs to. And that's going to squeeze out any air pockets or anything like that. And this will take a good day or two to really solidify and dry out and harden. Once it's all hard, it's going to be like there's the extra wood there. If these were cut a little bit better, I don't know. I wasn't there when this was made, but I'm definitely here when it's going to get fixed. So now the next thing for me to do while the liquid nails is drying is I went through and checked all the corners. And so I'm looking at the silicone around all the seams, and it all looks really good. And so we're going to come over here. I want to clean some of this on the inside, but if I can get a good angle. And here where the bulkheads are going to go, the silicone from where the old bulkheads were are still in there. So I've got myself a razor scraper, and I'm going to get down in there and clear off all the silicone, and be sure to be careful of this edge so I don't get that silicone cut. And I'm just going to prepare the surfaces for putting in my new bulkheads. So as you can see, it's about as clean as I can get it in there. And so the next thing I'm going to do is I went ahead and I taped off this section here, and I'm going to do my background painted black. And I like to use black vinyl based paint, and that way if I ever want to replace it, I can take that same razor scraper that I used and I can just scrape across the glass and remove it. So I've already prepped the surface, I cleaned it off, and I'm going to go ahead and start painting this. So I wish I had a paint roller, I just have a paintbrush, but this is the back of the tank after the very first coat I did. So here's what it looks like from the front. You can see that I painted the back and the right side. I won't be able to see those from any view in the apartment, they face walls. So this is after probably the third or fourth coat I did. And then I decided this looks good enough, and I pulled off the tape. And I made sure that my overflows I'd be able to see inside, and just to check the water level and see, if anything gets stuck back there. But I like the way this looks. It's really clean. While I was waiting for the paint to dry, I decided to take out all the screws that were in the stand one at a time and replace them with these much more rugged screws. So the screws on the left are what I put in myself, and the screw on the right, the gold one, are the ones that I pulled out. I've only used hang on the back filters and canister filters, so for this I was actually going to use a sump since it's so big, and I've never done that before. And going through a lot of research, I found that this pump seems to be okay. It's a really good bang for your buck. I was just looking for something that's quiet, and it's also affordable and reliable. And sometimes it's kind of like one of those things where here's 3, pick 2. But this seemed to fit my budget, and this is what I went with. I actually went with 2 of these E-Flux pumps by Current. Even though the bulkheads had gaskets on them, I covered the gaskets in silicone, and I siliconed around the holes where the bulkheads would go. And then once I squeezed the bulkheads on and tightened them pretty good, I put silicone over the top too, because why not? So everything should be pretty sealed. I'm going to wait, a couple days for this to dry. So big learning moment for me is how a lot of these overflows and drains work. I've always only used canisters and hang on the backs. I've like my Aqua Clears and my FX4s. So I didn't know anything about plumbing. And it turns out this is a Megaflow. It's been owned by a couple different companies, but it's pretty much basically just a Durso style drain, and there's one on each corner. So nothing I'm doing is optimal, I'm sure. I'm brand new at doing sumps and drains and all this. I've never done this before, but my drain line is a I don't know what you call it, a slick fitting. There's no threads or anything like that. And then my return line from the pump back into the tank, it's going to be a barbed fitting, because I'm going to be using flexible hose for that. But it's going to be a hard PVC tubing for the drain. I was going to build my own sump out of an old 55-gallon tank I had in a storage unit. And fun fact, a 55-gallon tank actually fits just fine in the back seat of a Dodge Charger. People that know what they're doing and all the pros out there, they're going to be smacking their hands against their face looking at this with all the 90-degree turns I have in my plumbing. But it's working. It's like that right now, and it's going just fine. In the future, I'd probably want to put my sump maybe off to one corner, but I just wanted to center it for the weight. Um, I don't know. It's not optimal, but it's working, and that's pretty much the whole theme of this build. I've looked at a few different types of sumps online and put this together myself out of that 55 that I had. And as it sits now, it doesn't work very well in this picture. And I actually had to go through and I removed the very first baffle. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of better ways of doing it, but without that first baffle, with the water going all the way down to the bottom and then having to flow up into the main chamber, that seems to be working. It's been going for several months now at the time of making this video, and everything's just fine. I wish I recorded while I was doing it, but this is when I was first putting water in for the first time after having everything painted, having worked on the stand. So this was like a almost like a tense moment for me. So I guess that's why. But it did hold water. Everything was good. And then in the next clip here, I'll show you the water flow. I ended up making some little egg crate support structures here that I was going to put some of my first filter pads on. This is just a test fit, but yeah, I just layered up a bunch of filter pads above the egg crate. So I put my sand in with the water and everything, the pumps are running, and this is how it looks. And this is when I first started feeling almost like a relief, like it's almost done and it's looking good. I had a smile on my face, and I'm just imagining how everything's going to look with the fish in there, and I'm just happy at this point. So I went ahead and added some real lights to the top of the tank. I used three, they're bigger, almost pendant style. They came with steel tethers to hang them, but I just have them on my lids. And then I added my big Amazon sword, and I started putting some of my fish in there. And then I painted the stand black so that it looks kind of cool and it blends in a little bit with the frame. And until I get doors made, I'm just going to have like a black curtain on the inside of the tank. And so the black frame will kind of blend in with the black curtain. And you see I added one of my fluval like saltwater lights onto my sump just so I can see it. And yeah, I think it looks pretty good like this. At this point, I like the way that my Amazon sword looked in the middle of the tank, but the little tiny planter that it was in was not doing a job for me. So I went and I got some bags of these different types of aquarium rocks, and I found these kind of gray, like marbled looking ones. Looked really good to me, and I put those stacked around the Amazon sword, and it keeps my bigger fish from uprooting it, and it's been surviving for a pretty long time. This is kind of like the complete setup for now until I go ahead and start adding doors and stuff to the stands. As you can see, there's my leather chair. When I come home from work, I can sit down right there, and I've got a big 6-foot tank to my right and then a big 6-foot tank right in front of me. And I can watch, one tank has small community fish in it, and one is a big predator tank. And I could sit there and I will just watch these fish for hours. So my final notes on this tank is, first of all, I was nervous and skeptical about the wheels at first, but they've held up great and they've proved that they're worth their weight in gold. This is the biggest tank I've had so far, and it's been one of the easiest to move and just to build out. Being able to move it around my room by myself just to get to the back of it, no problem. Yeah, all my tanks I wish I had wheels. The second note I have is the doors. I never finished wrapping the lumber or the stand in plywood and adding doors. So the more I think about it, the more I can get away with just adding doors and not having to wrap the whole tank or the whole stand. I think it looked pretty decent. So one of the next things I'm going to do is add doors to the stand. I've already ordered some hinges online, and we'll see where that goes. My third note is the canopy. I'd like to build a canopy and maybe use it to lift the lights up off the tank. When I see the look of a nice tank with a canopy online, it always looks way nicer, more expensive than, something that I could do. So I think that I like that look and I can do it. So I think I'm going to try to build a canopy in the future. And my final note is that the sump has been running for a while and I've serviced it several times now, and I just want to build a new one off of some of the tweaks and changes that I'm wanting to make with the current sump. I already had one major change that I had to do, and I had to remove one of the baffles, and that was such a pain in the ass to remove the baffle uh, while I couldn't move the sump out of from under the stand. So that was just a pain in the ass, and I don't want to do that again. So the next time, um, I'm going to buy another 55-gallon tank from Petco, and I will start building out a new sump in that. And then whenever it's time, I'll try to either move my plumbing out of the way or maybe make a cut and then slide the new sump in and then uh, plumb in a new PVC so that it all fits. But the current sump works, but it's far from perfect. And if I'm going to dedicate so much space in the stand for just a filter, I want it to work the best it can. So that about sums up my thoughts on this 180-gallon tank. It was a great buy, and I really enjoyed fixing it up and just getting it running, and more importantly, getting my big fish a bigger home. So if you like this tank and you like how it turned out, or you think you would have done something differently, please tell me in the comments and I'll check them out. This tank has been a lot of work, so subscribe and like the video. Why not? It's free. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.